when they list the actions, the 7 actions of body and speech,
Right.
they say that these are the intended actions, or no, these are the actions that are intended. I think whichever, we're talking about the intended actions, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But these are all negative. Why do they list only negative actions?
Well, these are called the 10 negative actions.
Right. I know
and
that.
non-virtuous actions, and the 10 virtuous actions are the opposites of those.
Right. I know
So
that.
intending not to kill is a virtue. Intending to kill is a non-virtue.
Right. But they only list the non-virtuous ones in the text when they talk about, they said they can basically all be boiled down to these.
Hold on, my medical center is calling. I just want to see if this is something I need to attend to. Hello? Hello? Must be an automated message about an appointment I have on Tuesday. Okay, sorry. So generally, when the Buddha taught how to, the most important thing at first is to avoid negative actions. And once you've got that under control, then you can create virtue. You can work for others and so forth. So the most important thing at first, because we, unknowing and ignorant as we are, let's say before we met the Dharma, even more ignorant of even karma and so forth, we would create negative karma all the time, maybe inadvertently due to some imprints from former lives of virtue. Maybe we'd create virtuous actions, but even our love of our, taking care of our loved ones and so forth, very much is mixed with attachment and so forth. So very little that we create that's virtuous. So that's the main thing at first, is to recognize the 10 non-virtuous actions and to guard against them. Like in the famous verse that I remember seeing for the first time in the temple in Dharamsala, a quote from the Buddhist teachings: do no negative actions, do nothing non-virtuous, create all virtue, completely control the mind. This is the teaching of the Muni. So it starts with first avoiding negativity. And then when you've got that under control, then if you try to create virtue, you have some possibility of success. Trying to make generosity at the beginning without having controlled your negative actions, your mind, your generosity can be mixed with expectation for reward, and so forth. Oh, nice. Dondrup, you have a nice microphone there above you. That's good. Okay.
Thank
Does
you.
it make sense, Christine?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you. And I have another question, but does anyone else have a question and want to go? I've already asked one.
Mark, Skylar, Stephen, anyone have a question? Dondrup? We have a couple of minutes. Okay, Christine, you get another.
Christine, yeah.
Okay, I get to go out again. No.
Yeah.
So I have 4, but I'll just go with 2. Sometimes I feel attached to Dharma, to having realizations, to feeling really good when, I do my sadhanas. And I realized to land of medicine Buddha, some events occurred that helped me to realize I definitely have attachments. So how do we deal with our attachment to Dharma, to wanting to feel good all the time,
Well, feeling, the good that we feel hopefully is closer to, it is not probably uncontaminated happiness.
Right.
But it is, let's say, if you have Dharma happiness, as a result of reducing your anger and your expectations and your jealousy, and you can kind of, oh, this feels so much better. That is a virtuous state, maybe still contaminated virtue. So that kind of contentment is getting in the direction of uncontaminated virtuous actions. Uncontaminated would mean when you're not contaminated by grasping to self-existence or inherent existence of yourself or of other things. We still probably are bedeviled by that, but at least if we can find some calm, we could call that Dharma happiness rather than calling it uncontaminated happiness. And that is, something to, like when we talk about the example I gave in the low grade course, if you see, if the king or queen's crown has lost some jewels on the ground and you're trying to find them, the servants have been enjoying to find them, and someone would say, oh, there's the jewel. You don't actually, they're so small, you just see a reflection of, a ray of light that is reflected off of it. But if you follow that ray of light, you will get to the jewel. So Dharma happiness is not necessarily uncontaminated, although uncontaminated happiness is Dharma happiness too. But Dharma happiness, in a more broad sense, is leading you toward that. So that's useful.
Yes, that's useful. Okay. I'm more balanced. Thank you.
Yeah. So Mark, I'm not sure. Did you have a question you were going to ask?
I did, but I don't know if it's directly related to this course. It's a Dharma question.
Okay,
but
that's
if
okay.
someone has a question related particularly to this course, then
no, go ahead.
But it's from reading the Vajracutter, and often he says grasping at a self, a sentient being, a living being, and a person. And I'm wondering if those four different entities have a deeper, like there's a deeper meaning beyond that. If it represents those four entities have a
right. So what were they again? Self, what was it?
Grasping at a self, grasping at a sentient being, a living being, and a person.
Right. Well, they are, of course, self can refer to a self of oneself and the self of others. Those four, if you talk about self as not meaning just oneself, they're synonymous. So self, person, what were the other two?
Self, sentient being, living being, person.
Right. So they all are referring to the same thing with different names. So that's useful to know, that because when we talk about persons, in English, we might think that means human beings, but person is a word that means in general all, anything that's sentient, anything that has mind and so forth. So those four would be equivalent. So who's in charge today? Dondrup, are you in charge? You want to stop the recording and start it again when we begin? Or
that's probably helpful things that you've said for people, so you've been spotlit, so we can just leave them in.
Okay. So we're gonna good. So we're gonna begin with our meditation as we've done each class. So sitting comfortably as much as you can, relaxing your body, relaxing your mind, recognizing your inhalation and exhalation, and then having recognized it, you can apply the mental factor mindfulness, as we will probably get to today when we talk about mindfulness. It is holding in mind something that you've already recognized. So being mindful of your breathing. At first, don't try to control it. Just watch its natural rhythm, especially the endpoints, and let go of any multitasking in your mind. Let go of thinking about anything else. you might notice if you look at me, you probably not, you're meditating. Sometimes I tuck my chin in a little bit, because if the head is almost just straight or a little bit up, there's more chance of disturbing thoughts coming. So one of the 8-point postures is to put the head a little bit forward, tucking in your chin a little bit. Having let go of the superficial other thoughts by watching the breathing, now place your attention on the clear light nature of your mental consciousness. The fact that it does not hinder the arisal of thoughts within it, nor does it hinder their dissolving back into the consciousness. The aim is to try to have a non-conceptualizing mind, non-conceptualizing in the sense that other thoughts are not being pursued, still conceptual, because we're trying to develop a mental image of this mind nature, clear light nature. This state, perhaps we could call, one of the feeling present in it is kind of like Dharma happiness. It's not uncontaminated happiness, but we're not besieged by other worries and so forth. And we can actually develop some joy in recognizing that we have this resource with us, this life, this clear light nature of the mind, and therefore we can overcome our problems. Even if we fail again and again, we get angry, we get attached, we get jealous again and again. Recognizing that, we apply antidotes to them. We try to purify the negative actions we created. And we can feel some confidence that as we get closer to death, we can approach that in a state of mind that doesn't have a heavy burden of negative karmas that will throw us into the lower realms immediately. And that we can use this opportunity right now afforded to us by the fact that we have a life of leisure and endowment, which is the cause of our having this chance to look at the clear light nature of the mind, our conventional Buddha nature. This is the result of past virtues that we've created, often with great effort, keeping precepts, making prayers to benefit others in the future. But this has an expiration date. This will end. And while we have it, we want to make the best use of it, not simply to accumulate wealth and power and admiration of others, to have as many followers on Twitter or whatever, but to generate virtuous qualities in our mind, the virtuous mental factors, the three principles of the path: renunciation, bodhicitta, and wisdom that realizes emptiness, with an aim of, first of all, as we're human, finding our own peace of mind. The ultimate aim of ourself is to have the Dharmakaya, a mind that is totally blissful, all-knowing, no problems. And the ultimate aim of others is to be able to emanate the enjoyment body and the Nirmanakaya, the emanation body, to be able to help other sentient beings who have been intimately related with us over numberless lives, who are exactly equal with us in wanting to be happy, wanting to be free of suffering. Placing them at the forefront of our guidance, what we would like to protect, rather than just my own self, which is merely imputed, to recognize that we can recognize self in the entirety of sentient beings, not just in the 5 aggregates of this personal body. To bring about their benefit requires us ultimately, most perfectly, to achieve enlightenment, although we can coast along with lesser realizations, helping people to a certain degree, but to really help them perfectly and to achieve my own final aim, we have to achieve enlightenment. to do that, we have to know the mind, how to overcome the negative factors, the delusions, how to enhance the virtuous mental factors. We have to know those minds that are, those mental factors and minds that are present in other situations, the omnipresent mental factors, the object ascertaining mental factors, changeable mental factors, and so on. So for that purpose, I'm going to participate in the class tonight with all these thoughts in mind, to be able to, in understanding the mind better, to be able to practice virtue, achieve realizations with the end aim of achieving enlightenment. For the sake of all sentient beings, we can effortlessly and spontaneously lead them out of suffering and lead them, set them into that same state of omniscience. How wonderful that would be. That's my purpose. I'm going to listen to the teachings, participate in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. This is one way of generating the motivation, the Bodhichitta motivation. And bringing your attention back to the present. Good morning. A couple of people are off. I think Doris is not here, right? Doris said she's having some problems with her eyes, and Karen and David are off visiting family, so they're going to catch up on YouTube later. So before we begin, does anyone have any questions, observations, either from before or... Barbara, I don't remember, where are you located, Barbara?
I'm in Virginia in the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Oh, okay. You're probably not too far away from, I'm in the Appalachian part, near, further in North Carolina. Anyone have anything they'd like to ask? Clarification from before? How are we doing? No? Oh, Christine, okay.
I do have one more to relate more to the topic.
Sure.
The actions are listed as virtuous and non-virtuous and neutral, and meritorious, non-meritorious, and immovable.
Right.
What's the difference between the virtue, non-virtue, and the meritorious and non-meritorious?
So the generally we can say actions are virtuous, non-virtuous, or neutral. When we talk about adding another dimension to this, there's a particular category of actions that are called immovable, which means that in the creation of them, they will not ripen in any other way than in a particular way. That is to say, in a particular realm. If you create preparation for the first concentration, or you achieve the first concentration of the form realm, or the second or the third, and so forth, you create a certain kind of karma that's called immovable. It will only ripen in either in those realms or in the throwing karma that throws you into those realms. So in the category, when you talk about meritorious, non-meritorious, and immovable, it doesn't include every action, because it doesn't include neutral actions, right? Neutral actions are not meritorious. They are not non-meritorious, and they are not necessarily immovable. So although that's not made clear in the text, I think that is correct. It is a category that the Buddha talked about, another way of dividing actions. Okay. What do you think? Anyone have a gripe with that? Oh, Doris is here. Doris is here. I think her picture's not on because she said she was going to be wearing sunglasses or something like that.
Good morning, Venerable.
Good morning, Doris.
I'm going to be incognito today.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope you're doing well.
Thank you. Thank you. So we are, we've gone through definition of mind. Oh, sorry, Ada.
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
Wouldn't contact be first on the list? How can you have feeling without contact?
Okay, good point. So, indeed, if you talk about causality, maybe of the five, what are we talking about? The five omnipresent mental factors, you should put contact first. But because there are other reasons for the order, feelings are the main cause of our generating delusions. In terms of virtuous, say pleasant feelings, we engage in attachment, actions that are trying to enhance or to keep those feelings or to get the feelings that we've experienced or imagine, meeting some Richard Gere or something like that, we imagine would bring us happiness, even though we may not have felt that yet. If we felt something unpleasant, we engage in negative, anger and resentment and putting other people down and so forth. So feeling, when we talk about the five aggregates, after the form aggregate of the remaining mental aggregates, feeling is first also, right? So where would contacts come in the rest of those five aggregates? Does anyone know? Maybe Stephen, where would contact come in the five aggregates? You're muted. I can't read your lips. You have to unmute.
Sorry, it would come under compositional factors, George.
Right. So yeah, so you would see the same thing there, Ida. But contact, as you say, in causal terms, that would probably be the first. There has to be contact. You're right. In the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha taught first the truth of suffering, and then he taught the second truth is the origin of suffering. Which of them come first? Can you have suffering without the origin of suffering? Because the origin of suffering is twofold, right? Who remembers the easy thing comes off the lips? Karma and Clacia, right? Two Ks. Karma is a direct cause of suffering. Clacia is the indirect cause that created the karma. You would think there's an argument in the Four Noble Truths. Some people say, oh, the Buddha should have taught the origin of suffering first. Right, Ida? Because it's causal. So the answer is that it is meant that until you have realized suffering, the truth of suffering, you may not be interested in the origin of it. So that's taught first. So there might be some similar reasons here, although, as you say, if you speak in causal terms, cause and effect, contact might be first. Okay, does that help? Okay. So I can't tell if Marcus got his arms all over the place. You're not asking questions. Okay. So let's go back here. So we finished more or less about contact, right? or at least we talked about it. So just as a reminder, I mentioned, and maybe I didn't mention this fact. Here it says, in the text, it says, in our translation by CG, it says, what is contact? Response. It distinguishes the transformation of the sense power upon aggregation of the three. So CG has translated that sentence the way that translators translate backwards. The term distinguishes comes at the end of the sentence, but still could be first. Jeffrey Hopkins translates it this way, in adding in the commentary that comes just below that. He says, contact distinguishes its object. So what is it distinguishing? Here, the way that CG is translated, it sounds like it distinguishes the transformation. It's actually what it distinguishes or knows is its object upon aggregation of the object, sense, power, and mind, the coming together of those three, as it distinguishes its object as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, or in another way of saying, rather than saying pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, is say attractive, unattractive, or neutral, because it has not yet had a pleasant feeling. Contact is the cause of feeling. So, but it has somehow recognized its object, distinguished the object at that point as being kind of likable or unlikable, you know, attractive or unattractive. And as a result of that, it sets the stage for karma to ripen in the mental factor feeling, where you actually have the pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling. So just as has been said above, contact is a knower that upon aggregation of the three, object, sense, power, and primary consciousness, distinguishes an object in accordance with whatever feeling, pleasant and so forth, that is to be experienced, future tense, that will be experienced by the mental factor feeling. Here, transformation of the sense power is stated for the following reason. For example, due to the meeting of an attractive form, so now the word attractive is used here, the eye sense power transforms into a cause of attachment to a pleasant feeling. Likewise, contact, by distinguishing attractive form, this transforms into a cause of pleasant feeling. So when it distinguishes an attractive form, and sort of likable, it can transform into a cause of pleasant feeling. Transform means that the faculty now has the ability to experience the mental fact, or let's say the faculty is physical, but it doesn't, but it has the ability then to generate the mental factor feeling. So we talked about 6 kinds of contact. So in the 12 links of dependent origination, is contact one of the 12 links? Does anyone know? Stephen has got his hand. Yeah. Ida knows. What is contact one of the 12 links? You have to unmute. I'm sorry.
If I remember correctly, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Does anyone? Rowena, you're nodding. That's right? What are the 12 links? Ignorance, karmic formations, consciousness, name and form, and what comes next?
Contact.
No. 6 faculties. 6 faculties. Contact. What else comes? Contact. Rowena, what are you going to say?
I can't remember.
Anyone? Someone must be looking on the internet. Is feeling in there? Feeling come after? So in the diagrams of the 12 links, there is a person who has an arrow sticking into their eye that represents contact, right? So as a result of contact, in order to have contact, the faculties have to have been generated beforehand. So that's why the 6 faculties comes before that. So here we have contact upon the aggregation of visible form, eye sense power, eye faculty, and eye consciousness, all the way up to contact upon aggregation of a phenomenon, means a particular object of the mental consciousness, a mental sense power, which is a previous moment of consciousness, and a mental consciousness. Okay. So next mental factor is attention, as opposed to intention. Attention, the Abhidharma Samuccaya, the Compendium of Knowledge, says, what is attention? It is an engagement of the mind. It has the function of holding the mind to the object of observation. Isn't that what mindfulness does? Mindfulness is another mental factor, right? Here it says it has the function of holding the mind to the object of observation. It's a little bit different than mindfulness. Attention, first of all, you could say, I think it even says here, just as said before, it is a knower that focuses the mind, or you could translate that as directs the mind, which is concomitant with it. That means the primary mind and the other mental factors that are concomitant with it, that share, the same object and so forth. It focuses or directs the mind on, focuses on or directs to a particular object of observation. What is the difference between intention and attention? Intention moves the mind to general objects, whereas attention directs the mind, doesn't move the mind, directs the mind to a particular object. So the movement of the mind in intention, sort of it drags along the delusions or the virtuous mental factors with it as it's moving, thereby creating karma. Here it's not moving, it's just directing it to a particular object within the perceptual field. So Jeffrey Hopkins translates attention differently. He translates it as mental engagement, because we saw in the definition, it says it has the function, it is an engage. What is attention? It is an engagement of the mind. Okay, the Tibetan word is yilat chepa. So when you develop the stages to develop tranquil abiding, there are what, 9 mental intentions, attentions, or mind engagements. So here he's translating it as mental engagement. Mental engagement directs the mind, or focuses the mind to a specific object of observation. The difference between intention and mental engagement, same thing as we just said here, they're using the word mental engagement instead of attention. The difference between intention and attention, or intention and mental engagement, is that intention moves the mind to objects in general, whereas mental engagement directs the mind to a specific object. So now there's a little discussion here. Discussion of the category of omnipresent mental factors. So remember, kun ro nga. Kun means all. In this case, it means always, because the Tibetan word kun dro nga, dro means going, nga means 5. In Sanskrit, it's samantaga, pancha samantaga. So pancha means 5. Samanta means always. So it's the kun doesn't mean all, it means always, always going, always functioning. What is the reason for calling these 5 mental factors, feeling and so forth, omnipresent? Kundro, literally go, always going. She has a question mark. Well, she has go all. It means the kun there is short for kundu. Always, Samanta. They are so called because they are mental factors that accompany, literally go after all minds. Furthermore, if any of the 5 omnipresent mental factors are missing, then the utilization or experience of an object will not be complete. If feeling is absent, there will be no experience. If discrimination is absent, then there will be no apprehension of the uncommon signs of the object. If intention is absent, the mind will not be directed to an object. If attention she says, it will not be directed. Jeffrey, instead of saying directed, he says it will not approach its object, because intention is the moving. So we use the word directed kind of as a synonym of focus in the next one. If attention is absent, then mind will not be focused or directed to a particular object of observation. If contact is absent, there will be no support for feeling, there'll be no support for discrimination, and so forth, as Ida pointed out, is sort of like causally the first. Therefore, in order for the utilization of an object to be complete, the 5 omnipresent mental factors must be present without exception. So in the Hinayana system, in the Abhidharma Kosha, I think, they say that there are the next group, the 5 object ascertaining mental factors, are also present in all in all experiences. But in general, we in the Abhidharma Samuccaya and so forth, we say that just these 5 are always present. So are they really always present in any mental event? Has anyone looked into that? Say, for instance, I mentioned before, when you're first waking up, if you're like me, you're kind of a little bit groggy, you may not see things clearly. There may not be all of the mental factors there. So this is talking about, let's say, the waking state. When you're not when you're about to fall asleep and some of the mental factors begin to fade a little bit. Generally, they're all there in the omnipresent mental factors, but there are certain mental states, especially say when the mind first enters into a fertilized egg from the intermediate state. Not all of the mental factors are immediately present, but they will evolve quite quickly. Louis.
Would that mean, could they be there, but in a latent state?
Oh, they'll certainly be
a latent state.
If they're not present, but the mind has the potential for them, they will be there in a latent state. They're ready to rise. But in any kind of waking state, these are always present. So now we're going to talk about the next group, the 5 object ascertaining mental factors. Other people, the word object ascertaining comes from an etymology from Tibetan, yul nge. Yul means object, nge means to ascertain or certain. But there is not a Sanskrit equivalent in the texts. So that's, Jeffrey has translated that as determining mental factors rather than object ascertaining. Stephen, you had a comment. Sorry, I didn't catch you before.
Oh yeah, thank you, Venerable George. This is just going back to the omnipresent mental factors. And in the last class, we talked about inattentive perceptions. So would we say that inattentive perceptions are just when there's a lack of attention, or could any of those the absence of any of those 5 mental factors cause an inattentive perception?
So in an inattentive perception, the mind is not focusing enough. The mental consciousness has not focused enough on the input to the 5 senses, right? So it is said that an object clearly appears to those senses, but is not ascertained. That means that the mental consciousness hasn't paid sufficient attention, say you could use the mental factor attention, to that, and so it can't recall that it has experienced that in what we would say an actual inattentive perception, an experience in which an object appears but is not ascertained. So I think you could say attention was not paid to that. Yeah, that would be. I don't know if any of the other mental factors, omnipresent mental factors, would be present. If you didn't pay attention to it, you wouldn't have the thought, oh, that was nice, or and so forth. So I think you're right in assuming that in an inattentive perception, maybe the 5 mental omnipresent mental factors would not all be present. Yeah, so yeah, it's an interesting point. Okay, so now when we talk about the 5 object ascertaining, as is translated here, or determining mental factors, these are mental factors that are present when you've actually gotten to something. You've actually understood something. Aspiration, belief, or I rather than the word belief, I think maybe a better word would be appreciation. I'm not sure how Jeffrey translated these. Yeah, she called belief. Mindfulness, meditative stabilization. Do you know anyone know the Sanskrit for that? Very famous Sanskrit word. What is it, Stephen?
Shamatha?
No, samadhi.
Oh.
Yeah, not shamatha. Shamatha is a particular kind of samadhi. Samadhi just means concentration. Here they translate meditative stabilization. We'll come to that as we get to it in more detail. So we have, if you had shamatha, these can be present in all the senses also. We have samadhi in our eye sense. So we don't have shamatha, single pointed concentration that's immovable and so forth, that acts as a basis for the first concentration. We don't have that in our eye consciousness. And wisdom. So aspiration, belief, mindfulness, meditative stabilization, or you could say samadhi if you want. Wisdom. You know the Tibetan word for samadhi? Anyone? Is anyone? Dondrup, have you studied Tibetan a little bit? Nadine, what is it?
Something.
No. Tingnezen. Something we could translate as meditation, or it can mean absorption and so forth. But here, the 2 words here, samadhi and tingnezen in Tibetan. Tingnezen is Tibetan. Samadhi is Sanskrit. They refer to the ability to concentrate on something, even in the least sense. If you didn't have concentration in your eye wouldn't be able to, and eye consciousness would just sort of wander around. Okay, so let's go through these in sequence here. aspiration, dunpa in Tibetan. You could also call it desire. Okay. Generally, we use another word for desire, but you could say aspiration. What is aspiration? It is the very wish to be endowed with this or that attribute of a desired thing. Yeah. It is the very wish, it is the very desire to be endowed with this or that attribute of a desired thing. It has the function of acting as a support for making effort. Do you know about the stages of developing tranquil abiding? You guys have heard those before, right? Barbara, have you heard? I wasn't sure you were. We talk about overcoming laziness is the first fault of developing tranquil abiding, right? The ultimate antidote of laziness is what? Does anyone know?
Joy.
Joy. Lewis, what do you think?
Subtleness, pliancy.
Pliancy, yeah. Is that what you were going to say, Nadine? You still have your hand up.
I thought enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm. No, okay, so say ultimate antidote is pliancy. What's the cause of pliancy? Effort or enthusiasm. What's the cause of effort? Dunpa, aspiration. What's the cause of dunpa? Faith. So when we talk about the antidotes to laziness, first of all, to have faith in the qualities of single-pointed concentration. Laziness here means laziness to develop single-pointed concentration, to develop shamatha, tranquil abiding. So laziness, the first antidote is faith, having faith that these qualities can be achieved. And then as a result of that, to aspire for them. And as a result of the aspiration, one develops effort or enthusiasm. And as a result of that, one can develop pliancy, okay, which is the actual antidote when the mind has no problem doing something. So this is the aspiration that we're talking about here. It is the very wish to be endowed with this or that attribute of a desired thing. It has the function of acting as a support for making effort. So there was this famous thing during George Bush's presidency where they said the mother of all wars, right? Do you remember that? So sometimes aspiration is called the mother of all effort. So why do we engage in something, in some kind of effort, is because we have a desire for some outcome. So desire or aspiration is very, very important. So here it says, just as has been said above, aspiration is a knower that upon observing some intended thing, seeks it. The way in which aspiration acts as a support for effort is as follows. So this is a quotation from Maitreya's Uttanamche, the discrimination of the middle and extremes. U means middle, like Uma, like we say the middle way. Ta means extremes, the ends. Namche means discrimination. Madhyanta Vibhagna in Sanskrit, one of Maitreya's 5 texts that he passed on to a Sangha when a Sangha visited Tushita heaven for his teaching session. So in that text, it says, stanza 4 or 5, the support and that supported by it, and the cause and the result. So what is that talking about? It says in Lanrim Chemo, Lama Tsongkhapa's Great Stages of the Path, it says, if you cannot stop the laziness, which is non-enthusiasm toward cultivating meditative stabilization. So this is what we were just talking about. You know, in order to do that, you need to, in order to develop mental the shamatha, you need to have you have to overcome non-enthusiasm. That means you have to have enthusiasm, right? You have to have effort. And that, if you cannot stop the laziness that is a non-enthusiasm, you know, a laziness toward cultivating meditative stabilization, and that takes joy in its discordant class, what does that mean? Mind that takes joy in the discordant class of shamatha. That means is happy just to sit back and watch, you know, all of the episodes of the drama you're watching on TV or whatever. Takes, you know, if you cannot stop laziness that takes joy in its discordant class, the discordant class of shamatha, then from the outset, you will not be inclined to engage in meditative stabilization. So laziness is the first fault in developing meditative stabilization, and especially the particular meditative stabilization that's shamatha. Even if you do achieve it once, it will quickly degenerate since you will be unable to sustain it. So even if you're able to concentrate a little bit, you'll lose it because you can't sustain it. Therefore, it is most critical to put an end to laziness at the beginning. So when we talk about shamatha, we're not talking about it this class, other than it comes in as a very important thing, because shamatha is sort of like one of the doorways in which you can make, you know, realizations very quickly. You can realize emptiness. You can develop other kinds of realizations very quickly if you have a concentrated mind. Therefore, it is most crucial to put an end to laziness at the beginning. This is talking about a particular kind of laziness. Regarding this, when you attain pliancy, in which your body and mind are filled with joy and bliss, laziness will be overcome. This is the same order I was talking about before. The ultimate antidote to laziness is pliancy. You get that when you've actually developed tranquil abiding. Then there will be no laziness. Since no weariness will arise in your application to virtue all day and night, you can go, you know, you can continue in meditative stabilization in shamatha day and night for hours and hours, days even, and your mind will not feel weary to do that. You'll still have joy in doing that. In order to generate that pliancy, you must be able to undertake continuous effort in meditative stabilization. So to get pliancy, you need effort, going through the various stages. And that takes, you know, that takes some, you know, that's not easy. What did I say? Yeah, effort. And in order to produce that effort, you need a continuous, fervent aspiration that seeks meditative stabilization. So aspiration is the mother of effort, is one of the phrases that you find in the teachings. In order to produce that effort, you need continuous, fervent aspiration that seeks meditative stabilization. As a cause for that aspiration, you must have stable faith of captivation, captivating faith, due to having seen the excellent qualities of meditative stabilization. So understanding the qualities of shamatha, let's say, you can develop faith that it can be achieved. Therefore, you will aspire for it. And due to that aspiration, you will put effort into the stages to develop it. And as a result of that effort, you'll end up with pliancy, mental and physical pliancy that allow you to remain in meditation for a long period of time. Then you can leave an imprint in the mind of things, really strongly, like not just like rubbing your fingers across the sand, which is blown away by the wind, or just placing the hand in the sand for a short instant so the handprint is there, but the first time the tide comes in, it's washed away. But pushing it way down in there so that it will leave an indelible imprint in the mind. Ida.
Thank you, Venerable. Where does motivation come into play here? Is it before having that conviction? Wouldn't you need the motivation to get there?
Yeah, motivation would be, you'd encounter different kinds of motivations all along the line. If you have a motivation to find ultimate peace of mind, a motivation to benefit yourself, mainly say to achieve liberation, or motivation to benefit sentient beings to achieve enlightenment. And as you investigate the various tools that you need, of course, you need the three fundamental aspects of the path, right? Renunciation, Bodhichitta, and wisdom of emptiness. But to achieve any of them, concentration is important, because if you just think about, you read the subjects and so forth once or twice, even if you do it a lot, if you don't concentrate on them, if your mind is wandering onto other things, you can't even achieve those fundamentals of the path. So concentration is one of the important qualities that we have to, one of the tools that we need in order to make the realization of the fundamentals of the path. So let me continue here. As for a cause of that aspiration, you have to have stable faith of captivation due to having seen the excellent qualities of meditative stabilization. Therefore, for a start, you should meditate again and again on faith that reflects upon the excellent qualities of meditative stabilization. One of the qualities would mean that because of having that kind of shamatha, I'll be able to make realizations of renunciation that have eluded me. I'll be able to apply the antidotes to the delusions. I'll be able to develop bodhicitta. In fact, some in the Gelugpa tradition, some of the monasteries say that without shamatha, without single-pointed concentration, having tranquil abiding, you can't generate bodhicitta in one lifetime. That's something that can actually bring it about. And of course, in order to realize emptiness, you need to have, you can have superficial realization, understanding, but in order to bring about some change of the mind, you need to have concentration. So seeing these excellent qualities of meditative stabilization, having witnessed the sequence of these through your practice, you will apprehend this excellent essential point with the clearest certainty. Okay, everyone certain? As proof for this point, Tsongkhapa cites the above passage from Discrimination of the Middle and Extremes, this text by Maitreya, one of his 5 texts, a very short text. The support, he explains its meaning as follows. The support is aspiration, because we're talking about here the mental factor aspiration, or what was the other way we translated it? Desire, you could say, right? The support is aspiration. What is the support? It is the support of striving or effort. The supported is striving or effort. The cause of aspiration is the faith of conviction in excellent qualities. The result is of striving is pliancy. So this little phrase in the Madhyanta Vibhagna just came above. So at the beginning of the page there, it says the support and the supported, and by it the cause and the result. So it's referring to these 4 stages to overcome laziness. The support is aspiration. The support is aspiration. It is the support of striving. The supported is striving or effort. The cause of aspiration is faith of conviction in excellent qualities. The result of striving is pliancy. So you take a look at that and go through those and see if you can see how they're connected with these 4 antidotes of laziness, the laziness that prevents you from achieving meditative stabilization. What is the faith of conviction? Dawn, do you know, have you heard that expression before? Faith of conviction?
I believe I've heard, thank you, Venerable George. I believe I've heard that. I just, I mean, I don't want to.
No, yeah, we've heard. So when we talk about faith, there are different divisions of faith. Does anyone know any of the divisions of faith? Well, one of them is faith of conviction, okay? Yeah.
I think
Kristen.
there's aspirational faith. Is that right?
Aspirational faith, yeah. Then what?
And then this one before that, I don't remember all of them.
Okay, yeah. So it's good to go back. When we encounter these things, it gives you the opportunity to go back and look at these things again. So we talk about lucid faith, faith of conviction, and aspirational faith, you could say. Maybe you could term them like that. So lucid faith is what we might call dumb faith, although it's not necessarily dumb at all. You know, what is faith? Faith is a state of mind that has some belief in qualities. So lucid faith is like having faith in your Lama or the gurus or the Buddha without necessarily having a lot of reasons. The state of faith allows all of the other kinds of doubts and worries to subdue. The mind is lucid. Do you know, you have a feeling what I mean by lucid? Sort of clear state of mind. Aspirational faith is faith that sees the good qualities of something and wants to achieve it. Faith of conviction is like the smartest kind of faith. It has analyzed something very deeply, like say that the Buddha is a perfect refuge and so forth, and has developed a faith that is convinced in that. It's not something that just, oh, the Buddha is all-knowing, go for it, you know, not just based on charisma or just words. So here it says, the cause of aspiration is faith of conviction, you know, where you're convinced of something. It's still not realized it yet, but it is faith. Sometimes you might wonder, how can you develop faith? You know, I don't have any faith in law of cause and effect and so forth. You have to analyze, and you could develop eventually the faith of conviction, which is probably the faith of conviction of the 3 kinds of faith is the strongest. It's something that is because it's based on reasoning and you've become convinced of something. Faith of conviction is something that won't be changed when other people tell you something else is better, you know, oh, you should follow Rajneesh, or you should follow, you know, I don't know what else nowadays, Trump, rather than the Buddha. Okay, so carefully reflecting upon these modes is an especially important essential point of practice. Just as the foremost omniscient one, which in the Galupa text refers to Lama Tsongkhapa, has said, if you turn your mind inward and carefully contemplate these modes in which the path has been taught by the great trailblazers. Who are the great trailblazers? Barbara?
I was going to say the people represented behind you.
Oh, yeah. Maybe you could say all trailblazers. Trailblazers here maybe refers to Nagarjuna and Asanga, who opened up the paths of the Madhyamaka and the Chittamatra, especially the Mahayana. Mahayana was kind of subdued, was more secretly practiced for many hundred years after the Buddha taught. Although the Buddha taught the Mahayana Sutras, what became more famous and easily practiced were the Hinayana practices, the hearers and solitary realizers, what today is called the Theravada and so forth. Maybe about 400 years after the Buddha's passing, Nagarjuna explained the Buddha's intention in the Prajna Paramita Sutras, and they became more accessible. Then later, a couple of hundred years later, Asanga explained from the point of view of mind only, the Chittamatra or Yogacara, also talking especially about the extensive deeds of the Bodhisattvas in his treatises. So if you turn your mind inward and carefully contemplate these modes in which the path has been taught by the great trailblazers to be definite in sequence, without leaving them as mere words, here we're talking about sequence, develop faith in order to have aspiration that will bring about effort, and then you will achieve pliancy and so forth. So if you are keen merely on the word, however, if you are keen merely on the words and understand the text of the great trailblazers to be simply some extraneous doctrine or branch of debate, then you will toss them aside when it comes to practice. You won't rely upon them. So there will be no way to gain certainty about these methods, let alone generating the excellent paths that please the conquerors. It's an epithet of the Buddhas, right? The conquerors, the jinas. In your continuum, you will not even have the good fortune of having the object that is to be understood dawn in your mind. So in the Gelugpa tradition, there's a great emphasis on understanding that the great treatises are not something just for scholars. Like you think, oh no, that's for debaters, like wonks. What's another word? Nerds, or something like that, right? What I need is just a simple practice from my guru, some oral instruction. So the famous expression in the Gelugpa is that trying to practice without understanding the text, the teachings of the Buddha, is like someone trying to climb a mountain who is paraplegic, who has no arms and no legs. Paraplegic maybe is different, but the armless rock climber is likened to the person who is trying to climb to the summit of enlightenment without having read and understood the texts. So when aspiration is divided, there are three types. Aspiration wishing to meet. What does that mean? You want, like say, for instance, something that's attractive, you want to meet. Aspiration wishing not to be separated. So all of these are talking about aspiration, right? Aspiration wishing not to be separated. So once you've met something that's pleasant, you have the aspiration not to lose it, right? The aspiration that seeks. And the aspiration that seeks is of many types. The aspiration seeking wishes, aspiration seeking views, and so forth. aspiration wishing to meet, aspiration wishing not to separate, aspiration that seeks. The last is again divided into aspiration seeking desires, aspiration seeking views, and so forth. You say wishing, okay? So aspiration is something that's going to be present when you're actually engaging in an object, determining in an object. What are the 5 object ascertaining mental factors? And the next one, belief. Here, Tibetan mupa. There is another translation of this, which I think is quite prescient. Rather than calling it belief, calling it appreciation. Maybe that's difficult because appreciation sounds like aspiration, right? Starts with a, shun at the end. So, what does appreciation mean? Just colloquial term. Skylar, what do you think when some of you say if you appreciate something?
Well, like, I appreciate you teaching us this, so I'm grateful that you're teaching us this, right? Like a gratefulness.
Gratefulness, okay. So somehow appreciation is something that we've seen some qualities in something, and we have we have well, let's see, when we say here, what is belief? So this is what I said, another translation of it is appreciation. It holds an ascertained thing to be just the way it has been ascertained. It has the function of non-captivation. That doesn't mean you're not captivated by the object. It means that you won't be captivated by something else when you appreciate something or when you believe in something. The reason I hesitate to use belief is because when we talked in low rig, what was one of the 7 states of knowing? Do you remember? Mark, you weren't in the low rig class, were you? You didn't study that. Stephen, what's the one I'm thinking of, do you think?
Oh, let's see. So it was, oh gosh, Venerable George. Well, it was just mere belief. You just like took things for granted.
We call it correct belief.
Correct, yeah.
Correct belief.
Correct.
And another way of translating that was what? Presumption. You know, you believed something which happened to be correct, or let's say assumption or correct presumption. You believed something which was correct, but you hadn't realized it yet. That was kind of what we meant in low rig. So I tend here not to like to use the word belief because there's some little overlap with that. What is belief or appreciation? It holds an ascertained thing to be just as it has been ascertained. You believe it, or you appreciate it. It has the function of non-captivation. Let me read from Geshe Rapton's book, which is translated by Steve Batchelor. So the words are, the explanation was given by Geshe in Tibetan. Steve translated into English, so there's a little combination. The English is good. Appreciation, that's this one, belief, is a distinct mental factor that stabilizes the cherished apprehension of a previously ascertained object. So from what Skylar said, you cherish something, you appreciate something, you know, like the teachings or something. It stabilizes the cherished apprehension of a previously ascertained object and does not allow the mind to be distracted to anything else. Or as the text here says, our CG's translation, it has the function of non-captivation. The function, it does not allow the mind to be distracted or be captivated by anything else. That's what is meant by non-captivation. Thus, it has the function of cherishing the object and securing the recollection of it. So it is not necessarily recollection, but it is what can improve your mindfulness or recollection when you cherish something, when you have a belief or appreciation of something. So going back to our text, just as has been said above, belief or appreciation is a knower which holds the object that has been ascertained by its valid cognition, thinking. It is just like this and not otherwise. Hence, its function is specified as non-captivation, because when one has gained firm belief in the object that one has ascertained, an opponent cannot steer one away from it. So when we were talking a couple of minutes ago about faith, the faith of conviction is one in which you have this kind of belief or appreciation in something, that is based on some kinds of thinking and analysis. For example, reflecting upon the difference between the Buddhist and non-Buddhist teachers in the context of going for refuge. So when we take refuge in Buddhism, we do not take ultimate refuge in teachers that teach paths other than the path taught by the Buddha. You don't take ultimate refuge in Christianity. You don't take ultimate refuge in Judaism or Islam or Sikhism or Jain. When we say Jainism, there were different non-Buddhist teachers at the time of the Buddha. In India at the time, I don't think, well, because it was before Christ, certainly Christianity wasn't there. I don't know if there was any Judaism. Certainly Islam came after Christ also, so they weren't there. But there were these other religions, non-Buddhist religions. For example, reflecting upon the difference between the Buddhist and non-Buddhist teachers in the context of going for refuge, one analyzes like this. What is an infallible refuge? Which is the infallible refuge among the various things, let's say teachers? And one ascertains that only the teacher, the founder, Buddha, is an infallible refuge. Here, it's not saying that the Dharma and Sangha are not infallible refuges. It's just talking about amongst the teachers, which is the infallible refuge. Was it, who was the founder of Jainism? Was he called Jain or? No, it was some other name, right? Who was the founder of the Samkhya and these other non-Buddhist traditions? They are not infallible refuges. And one ascertains that only the Buddha who founded Buddhism is an infallible refuge. Then when the doctrine taught by him, the Dharma, and the spiritual community properly practicing his doctrine, we would call the Sangha, when they are ascertained by valid cognition to be infallible refuges, a firm belief in them as final refuges is gained. Thereupon the forders, do you know what this is a translation that Jeffrey and others have used. Usually in Sanskrit, we say tirthakas, those that propose a method to liberation that doesn't actually get you there. They're fording, supposedly they ford the river of the ocean of samsara, but it doesn't get you anywhere. Thereupon the forders and so forth cannot lead one astray, and one has then joined the ranks of Buddhists. Remember in our tenets class, when we talked about the definition of a Buddhist, one of the definitions is one that took refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I'd like to add the extra phrase, although some of you quoted that in the final exam. I'd like to add the extra phrase, someone who takes refuge from the depth of their heart, who's convinced that the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are the refuge. It's not a matter of having a card, like in Singapore, you have your identity card and it says religion, Buddhist. Okay, I'm a Buddhist because it says on my certificate here that my identity card that I'm a Buddhist. That's not the definition of a Buddhist. Someone who's a Buddhist who's taken refuge from the depth of their hearts in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Based upon this, all wholesome qualities will increase. Furthermore, so what is this talking about? We're talking about belief, right? Or appreciation. So in the Bodhisattva deeds, it says, the Muni has taught that belief is the root of all that belongs to the class of virtue. It is the root that is constant meditation on the fruitional results. So this is quoting a verse from the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, right? Chapter 7. Verse 40. Does anyone know? You have translations of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara? So you might be confused. If you go back to that, in Steve Batchelor's translation, he says, the mighty one himself, that's the Muni, the mighty one is another translation of Muni. The mighty one himself has said that aspiration is the root of every facet of virtue. What did we just say? What was aspiration? That was the first of the object ascertaining mental factors, right? That's dunpa, aspiration. Here he's translating mupa as a belief or appreciation. He's translating as aspiration. The mighty one himself has said that aspiration is the root of every facet of virtue. Its root is constant acquaintance with the ripening effects of actions. Also, Steve Batchelor's translation also translates it similarly. The sage, I was translating Muni instead of the mighty one, he's translating it as sage. The sage declared that aspiration is a root of all virtues. Here, the actual word is this mental factor, appreciation or belief. And the root of all, the root of that, the root of appreciation, is constantly meditating on the results of the maturation of karma. So just to be aware of that, if you look up some of these quotations in other texts, you may see them translating it with different words. How are we doing? Making sense? Christine.
Thank you, Venerable George. I wanted to ask, it would seem belief is not incontrovertible. Is that correct, or is it incontrovertible? The type of belief we're talking about here.
Right. So
what do you call it?
So I what I like to say was this was better translated as appreciation, right? Because when we said, just as has been said above, it is a knower, that is appreciation or belief, which holds the object that has been ascertained by its valid cognition. So that would be incontrovertible, right?
Yes.
Whereas belief, as we talked about in Lorig, when we talked about the 7 ways of knowing, correct belief was not incontrovertible.
Right.
You could call it presumption or assumption. It was correct. We can have beliefs that are wrong, right?
Right.
And we're not talking about those. We're talking about a correct belief. Oh yeah, karma exists. I know. Dalai Lama is a Buddha. One believes something which happens to be correct. Excuse me in my enthusiasm. Dalai Lama is actually an omniscient being, that's my belief. But those are not, that correct belief is not necessarily incontrovertible. It hasn't been ascertained by valid cognition. Whereas this appreciation is when one has understood something through valid cognition as having qualities, and the mental factor that is generated then admires that, believes in that or admires that. That's why I prefer the translation that's used in this other text, calling this appreciation rather than belief. Okay. Rowena, are you thinking? I can't tell. Okay. You're thinking, okay. Are we okay?
Yes, Venerable George, we're okay. I'm thinking.
Okay. Okay. So, little test. Nadine, what are the five omnipresent mental factors? I don't know, not looking.
Attention, intention, contact, discrimination, and one is missing.
Feeling.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the list usually in this, as we were talking about before, why wasn't contact first in this list? It wasn't not necessarily causally. So feeling, discrimination, like in the five aggregates, feeling and discrimination come one after another. Feeling, discrimination, intention, which moves the mind to the object that's the principle of karma. Contact, strangely enough, comes there, and then attention, where it focuses or directs to a particular thing. Mark, what were the five object ascertaining mental factors? We haven't talked about all of them in detail, but we talked about the first two, right?
Appreciation and attention. No, yeah, appreciation and attention.
No, attention.
Aspiration.
Aspiration. No. Belief. Yeah. Appreciation I'd like to choose, but you can just use belief. So we talked about aspiration, kind of desire. Let's say are aspirations or desires necessarily virtuous or non-virtuous? You might think that if you use the word desire, it sounds like non-virtue, right? Oh, Buddhists have to get rid of all desires. Actually, aspiration, this first one, or you could call it desire, is a virtuous, is not necessarily virtuous or non-virtuous. What did we say here? Aspiration. It is a very wish to be endowed with this or that attribute of a desired thing. It has the function of acting as a support for making effort. So you can have aspiration for money, and that will act as a support for effort to achieve money, which generally would be negative, although bodhisattvas sometimes try to accumulate funds to benefit others. But aspiration, when we talk about bodhicitta, what is bodhicitta? Dundrapla, what is bodhicitta?
The wish to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings.
So that wish is this mental factor, aspiration. That's the actual word is this one, dunpa, or it's the aspiration to achieve enlightenment for the sake of others, right? And so there are two aspirations involved in bodhicitta. One is aspiring for, is that what we call it? Aspiration, aspiring for enlightenment. and the other is the aspiration to eliminate the suffering of sentient beings, which brings about compassion, right? So there's two mental factors there. So there's the debate in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, when one studies that at Sarajay or other monasteries, Kalupama monasteries, debate comes up. Bodhichitta, is bodhicitta a mental factor, or is bodhicitta a primary mind? Do you know, Donjup, is bodhicitta a mental factor?
I think when it's realized, it's considered a main mind because it's the basis of all action.
It's a primary mind, in fact, in the definition of bodhicitta. But just looking at it, if you say bodhicitta is the aspiration for enlightenment, or the desire to achieve enlightenment. Aspiration or desire are mental factors, right? They accompany the main mind of bodhicitta, the aspiration for enlightenment and the aspiration to separate sentient beings from suffering. They are there, but they are not, the actual state of bodhicitta is just the primary consciousness with which they are sharing similarities, but they will be there. Aspiration will be there. So the second one was belief or appreciation, Mark. Now we're going to get to the third one, mindfulness, Dempa in Tibetan. You might see it looks like it should be pronounced Drenpa, right? DR, but in that R kind of modifies the sound of the D. Denba. In Sanskrit, anyone know what this is in Sanskrit? What is this, Stephen?
Smriti.
Smriti. Like when we talk about the four close placements of mindfulness, Smriti Adhisthana. You know, what are the four close placements of mindfulness? Does anyone know? Have you studied in the tradition? Louis, you don't know? You haven't heard? Does anyone know? Mark, Skylar, Dawn, Doris? Doris,
I do.
Doris?
I think I do.
Yeah, okay. What are they?
Body, the
So
physical,
it's not just
the
mindfulness,
feelings,
it's close mindfulness. Yeah, close mindfulness in the body.
the feelings,
Feelings,
consciousness,
mind,
phenomena.
phenomena, right? Those are called the four
Can you say them again, please?
close placement of mindfulness on the body, on the feelings, on the mind, and on phenomena. So where have you heard of that? You say, I've never heard of those before. What are you talking about? Christine, have you ever heard of those before? When we do breathing meditation, we're mindful of the breathing, right? This falls under the category of close placement of mindfulness on the body. When you do the walking meditation, you know, in the Theravada retreats, sometimes, you know, you walk very mindfully, one foot in front of the other and so forth. That's also within the category of close placement of mindfulness on the body. When you're eating your food in the Theravada tradition, in those retreats, you know, mindful, you're chewing slowly. In the Mahayana, when we have eating meditation, we do it differently. We're trying to make offering to the Buddha, nature at our heart chakra and so forth, and different way of meditating. But eating meditation, that also falls in the close placement of mindfulness in the body. Close placement of mindfulness on the feelings means recognizing the feelings that arise within the body when you're meditating. So you've given up watching the breathing and so forth. Now you're just watching the feelings, the sensations. Pleasant feeling arises. It exists for some time. It disappears. unpleasant feeling, like so when you sit in meditation, one of the big obstacles is you feel something unpleasant, so you're distracted from your meditation, right? Recognizing that unpleasant feelings arise, they dissipate, and recognizing the resultant delusions that arise. When pleasant feelings arise, thoughts of attachment, wanting to be conjoined with that, aspiring to have that elongate arise. When unpleasant feeling arises, sort of irritation that falls in the category of, anger and hatred and so forth arise. So that falls into the category of mindfulness of the feelings. Close placement of mindfulness on the mind means recognizing its, in the Theravada tradition, recognizing its impermanent nature. From the Mahayana point of view, we also have the 4 close placements of mindfulness in the Mahayana. There it's almost like watching the clear light nature of the mind, the conventional clear light nature. And the 4th close placement of mindfulness and phenomena in the Theravada tradition is usually talking about impermanence and suffering, the 4 attributes of the first noble truth. The Mahayana mainly talking about phenomena are empty of inherent existence. So mindfulness comes in many places. Mindfulness is what when we did our breathing meditation in the beginning, I said, first you have to recognize the breath, right? Then you can have mindfulness, because the definition says, what is mindfulness? Here on page 28 and 29. It is a non-forgetfulness of the mind. You could maybe put it better. It's the mind's non-forgetfulness with respect to a familiar object. So the object has to be already recognized for you to have mindfulness, right? You can't have mindfulness of something you haven't recognized yet. It has the function of non-distraction. So the text says, just as has been said above, mindfulness is a knower that possesses 3 features. These are the objective feature, a familiar object, because you can't have mindfulness of the breathing until you've become familiar with it, you've recognized it. The subjective aspect, a non-forgetfulness upon having observed that object. That's kind of the main thing, right? Mindfulness means you don't forget it. You're keeping it in mind, holding it in mind. And its functional feature, how does that function? By keeping something in mind, it prevents distraction. Its functional feature, non-distraction. So its objective feature, its object is something that's familiar. Its subjective aspect, remember when we talk about subject and object, subjective aspect is that it functions to not forget the object, having observed it, you're holding it in mind. And its functional feature, what its function, what does it do? It prevents distraction, because when you're mindful of one thing, you won't be distracted by other things. The classic example, when talking about mindfulness, we talked about it in other contexts. The king has enjoined one of his pages, is that the right word? Someone in the entourage, to carry this bowl of perfume to the queen without dropping one drop. It's filled to the brim. He's got this container. The page is afraid of getting killed by the king, if he fails. So it's totally mindful, walking. So he's even a cat runs in front of him, he's going to being mindful of this, not to be distracted by anything else, right? If you have real mindfulness, you're focused on one thing and you won't be distracted by other things. Like in our breathing meditation, if you're mindful of the breathing, even other thoughts sort of rise in the mind temporarily, you won't be distracted by them Now, maybe, we will when we're just beginning, but the more our mindfulness focuses on the breathing, we won't be distracted by other things. Not being distracted by them means that we don't follow them, because in following them, we give them energy to last longer. And then we've lost our object, right? So mindfulness is very important. So it's explaining here the objective feature. Since mindfulness is not produced with respect to that which has not been previously familiarized with, the objective feature is stated as a familiar object. So in terms of the subjective aspect, even though the mind might have previously familiarized itself with an object, if it does not presently dawn as an object of the mind, mindfulness will not occur, right? So just because you know something in the past, you have to have it present in the mind right now. Thus, the subjective aspect feature is specified as non-forgetfulness of the mind. The word drempa in Tibetan, mindfulness, or smriti in Sanskrit, mindfulness, also is translated as memory, in different contexts. So even though you have a memory of something in the past, if it's not present right now, that's not mindfulness. It has to be a non-forgetfulness upon observing that object. So the object that you are mindful of has to be present in the mind. And then third, the functional feature of non-distraction, since the stability of the mind is enhanced in dependence on special mindfulness, the stability of the mind to remain without being distracted, right, is enhanced in dependence on special mindfulness. Its functional feature is specified as that of non-distraction. So you're stable, even other things come, you're not distracted by them. The mode in which mindfulness possesses the three features is very important in both the context of sutra and tantra. So the great Nagarjuna, the protector or the leader. The word we're translating here, protector, doesn't mean like protector, dharma protector. You can use it. Here the word is nata. Nata also can just mean leader. The person who you could call the Buddha the nata, the protector. Anyway, the protector Nagarjuna says in his letter to a friend, "O Lord," who's he calling Lord? He's referring to his friend, the king, in this honorific way. "Oh Lord," he's talking to the king. The Sugata, the Buddha, taught that mindfulness of the body is the sole path to be traversed. Pay attention and guard it. Due to mindfulness degenerating, all qualities will be destroyed. So if you're say, just talking about the body, if you're not mindful of what your body is doing, you swat the mosquito or you steal the candy or, so forth and so on. In the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, it says, and this is in the chapter 5, which is, does anyone know what chapter 5 is? Guarding alertness or guarding introspection. So here it says, even though one is learned, faithful and diligent in effort, many become tainted by downfalls due to committing the fault of lacking introspection. Let me read you Steve's translation. Even those who have much learning, faith, and willing perseverance will become defiled by a moral fall. He says downfall here. due to the mistake of lacking alertness or introspection. So why are we talking about introspection? It's related with mindfulness, right? Though they have amassed merit, these people who are learned, faithful, and diligent, and so forth, that merit is pilfered, stolen by the thief of non-introspection, not watching what's happening in their mind. That thief that follows upon the degeneration of mindfulness. Those people who degenerated their mindfulness proceed to bad migrations. The Band of Thieves. It sounds like the title of a movie, right? The Band of Thieves, the afflictions, looks upon an opportunity. Upon finding an opportunity, it pilfers my virtue and even destroys the life of good migrations. How does it do that? Destroys the life of good migrations. Well, the present life will be destroyed because of creating negative karma and falling into disrepute and everything, and future lives of good migrations will be destroyed by creating negative karma. Therefore, mindfulness should never be displaced from the door of the mind. If it does go, recalling the anguish of bad migrations, place it back. So, you know, in the 8 verses of training the mind, Nadine, have you ever studied the 8 verses of training the mind?
Geshe Langri Tangpa?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I read them often.
Yeah. So what do we say? Vigilant of my mind stream. One of the verses. Vigilant of my mind stream. The 3rd verse. Vigilant of my mind stream throughout all actions. Whenever delusions arise, endangering myself and others, I will confront and avert them without delay. So here is talking, vigilant means this kind of introspection, which is based on mindfulness. So being mindful, whatever you're doing, always be vigilant of your mind. Be mindful, first of all, be mindful of what's happening in your mind and be vigilant. That means check what's happening. If delusions arise, these bands of thieves, afflictions arise, you should confront and avert them without delay. What does that mean? That means, so like the guards at the door of the king's chamber, they've got their spears. They're standing on either side of the door. Can you visualize this? Right? They're just standing there. And then if someone comes in, they immediately confront that person. Who are you? And if the person's not to be there, they avert them. They stick them with the spear or they chase them away. So confront and avert means you should recognize when the delusions are rising and you should confront and avert them. That means apply the antidotes to them. Avert them means apply the antidotes to them as soon as they arise. Therefore, mindfulness should never be displaced from the door of the mind. So the guards are mindful, right? If it does go, recalling the anguish of bad migrations, place it back. Due to association with spiritual teachers, the teachings of the abbot, and due to association with fear, fortunate ones who act respectfully easily generate mindfulness. So I'll just read this and we'll go a little bit over it next time. I'm just about to finish. The increase of all excellent qualities of the paths and grounds. So when we talk about the 5 paths that lead to enlightenment and to liberation and the grounds of the Bodhisattvas and so forth, all of these excellent qualities are contingent upon the 2, mindfulness and introspection. Mindfulness is what holds the object in mind. Introspection is checking whether you've lost your mindfulness, whether other distractions are coming in, whether, delusions and so forth arise. and all accomplishments of meditative stabilization of sutra and tantra are necessarily achieved through this special mindfulness. Therefore, this very method of relying on mindfulness is of utmost importance for those who from their heart, from the depth of their heart, wish to practice. In this vein, the Bodhisattva Charyavatara says, let my gain and honor, my body and livelihood vanish. Doesn't matter. Even I lose, I become disgraced, my body becomes sick and vanishes, my livelihood vanishes. Never mind, let my other virtues degenerate, but may my mind never degenerate. I urge you, Shantideva said, those who wish to guard their minds, guard your mindfulness and introspection, even at the cost of your lives. Any thoughts? Mindfulness, Smriti. Stephen, oh, Christine got you first. Her hand is whitish.
So thank you, Venerable Steve. So you may have answered this, but there's a lot coursing through my mind right now. What is the practice to develop mindfulness again? How do we get better at it? Like day by day by day by day.
Yeah. So when you're trying to develop single pointed concentration, or say tranquil abiding, the stages. So first of all, you have to overcome laziness, as we said before. You have to have faith and quality so that you have effort. Then in meditation, you, let's say, so this is not talking about mindfulness in everyday life, talking about mindfulness in a meditative situation. You imagine the object. Let's say if you're visualizing the Buddha, the body of the Buddha as your object of concentration, okay? So as you do that, it may appear that you analyze his face is like this, his ears are like this, he has compassionate eyes, there's a hair curl here, Ushnisha on the top, his body is transparent, his fingernails and toenails are the copper colored and translucent, on the soles of his feet and his hands are the Dharma chakras, his clothing is above his body, is not seated on his body, sort of levitating on his body. Even that is an emanation of his mind. You analyze it like this until a mental image appears, and then you try to keep that in mind. First, you have to have found the object. When we talk about the stages of generating shamatha, the first precept is to find the object. That means to generate in your mind a mental image that you're visualizing, right? Vajrayogini, Yamantaka, whatever, Tara, Manjushri. And then be satisfied, even if it begins to fade, you lose, the eyes disappear, the ears disappear, hold as long as you can. And when it vanishes, again, analyze. Once you've analyzed so that you get a picture again, let go of the analysis. Analysis here means thinking the eyes are like this, the head is like this, the arms are like this, the left hand is at the waist, holding a begging bowl full of nectar. The right hand is over the right knee in the earth touching mudra. That's what analysis is in this context, so that you get an image, then hold that as long as you can without being distracted. And by the power of that, the next time you sit down to meditate, or once you've lost the object and you analyze again, it will become a little clearer. You shouldn't expect from the very beginning to have a clear object of observation. That's one of the big faults, that people keep on analyzing again and again so that it becomes clear. Just whatever degree of clarity you have at the beginning, hold that. that acts as a basis when you recall it later, the familiarized object, it becomes a little clearer. So the mindfulness on that comes about because of familiarity and learning to let go of distracting thoughts, the multitasking mind, oh, I have to bake bread today. I better get baking soda or whatever you use, yeast to get yeast. Letting go of all of these other things, just being mindful of this one thing because of having seen the benefits of tranquil abiding. Now, in everyday life, if you're talking about mindfulness, being mindful of your mental continuum, vigilant of my mind stream throughout all actions, watching your mind. And this is talking about introspection here, vigilance. When delusions arise, endangering myself and others, confront and avert them without delay. So being mindful of your actions acts as a support for vigilance and introspection. How can we enhance that mindfulness? Through the meditative practice, watching your breathing, even not talking about the more sophisticated object of visualizing the Buddha, just watching your breathing, mindful of that. Once you've recognized it, you're mindful of it because it's already been recognized, and not being distracted by anything else, holding that carefully, like you would be, you'd be careful in the class with a Swiss teacher. I joke, I think of Swiss sometimes being very severe, and like beating your fingers with a ruler if you've done something wrong, taking very seriously this object, like the person carrying the bowl of perfume to the queen, or a bowl of hot sesame oil, not dropping one drop, holding that very tightly. What we call squeezing attention. Squeezing doesn't mean squeezing the body. The body can mean completely relaxed, but squeezing your attention, holding that more and more, then that can enhance the ability of mindfulness to keep something in mind. Okay. Stephen, you have a thought?
Oh yeah, thank you, Venerable George. And in a way, you already answered my question in your answer to Christine's great question. But it has to do with the difference between mindfulness and introspection or vigilance.
Right.
So mindfulness is really popular nowadays.
Yes.
But I think when there's a clear definition of it, it's actually referring to introspection or vigilance, some kind of reflexive awareness of what's going on.
When what is you mean what the common
in the common parlance, like mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Yeah.
Like
that's
that.
more like introspection. But here, mindfulness is the ability of the mind not to forget the object, to hold it. And what do we say? These three features. What do we just say here? Subjective, familiar object. You have to have something you've already recognized. Subjective feature, non-forgetfulness. So not to forget that. Hold that in mind. Mindfulness. And it acts to be not distracted by other things. In addition to that, if you couple that with actual alertness or introspection, I'm not talking about two things, two different words to translate the same thing. When you're watching, besides the mindfulness there, you're careful, you're holding the Buddha's body and mind, but you're also, with alertness or introspection, you're watching if other thoughts come that are subtly draining some of your attention away, what we call subtle, just a subtle
laxity.
Subtle laxity would be another thing where you're losing the clarity of the object. Subtle distraction, So the two main distractions, the two main faults then are losing the clarity of the object, sort of like almost falling asleep. That's called laxity. And the more prevalent thing at the beginning is distraction. When you're distracted to something else, part of your attention goes to something else, usually something that's pleasant. So we call that excitement. But there's other kinds of distractions also. If you're really angry at someone or something like that, your mind is, draining away some of your attention. So your mindfulness can then degenerate. So the two act to help one another like that. Okay. Any of the other gang have something you wanted to ask? Okay. So let's dedicate. Yeah, I think we created some merit this morning. We tried to have a very positive motivation, Bodhichitta motivation. We've tried to keep alert and mindful and alert and introspection. We're talking about these mental factors. These virtuous actions will ripen within cyclic existence as something pleasurable, as their virtue, but to dedicate them so that they're not simply used up in some, non-dharmic sense in the future, simply being attractive or wealthy or something that could become the cause of delusions, but may they ripen in such a way that they act as the substantial cause of my realizations from now until reaching enlightenment, so that I can effortlessly and spontaneously benefit all sentient beings. Due to these merits, may I quickly become a Buddha, Guru Buddha, teaching Buddha, and lead each and every sentient being into that very same state. Thank you very much. May the supreme jewel Bodhichitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen already not diminish, but increase more and more. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, his morality, who serves as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes the magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please live long. O wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in the world, incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, Dalai Lama, 14th Dalai Lama, may your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And Lama Osel, venerable to you whose kindness exceeds that of the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us in intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request. O Lama, please live long. And Geshe Sherab, beloved teacher, leading your students toward wisdom and compassion, explaining through exacting discernment the steps, the stages of the graduated path. You, unequaled guide, please live a long and stable life. So thank you. Look forward to seeing you next week. Stay safe.